took a step back, and Vervain grabbed his gun. Hello, welcome to my second video on me sharing character stories I've written. They're not so fun, fairly sad, full of fantasy, whimsy, and tragedy that makes me question why I am the way I am. Then after I've told you the story, I'll dissect it for you and tell you all about the themes, motifs, foreshadowing, and symbolism, so that you can see how many little details you caught while listening to the story. So with that, we'll get into the story after I quickly beg you to follow my channel if you enjoy listening to the video or looking at my art. With that out of the way, let's get into a story inspired by Frankenstein and the concept of the past. We start our story in the nation of the Moonshade Isles, an archipelago populated by all types of elves who wanted to live separately and freely from the outside world. The life found here is fishers providing most of the food for the rest of the kingdom. Seafarers and water druids, sometimes playing together, highlight the ideals of Moonshade. Freedom, play, living life to its fullest, and community is what this kingdom is all about, all brought together by the most important piece of this peaceful puzzle: magic. What lets the high priestess of this kingdom communicate with their goddess? What lets the druids keep away the ocean when she's angry? And what keeps their community full of wonder? This brings us to one very affluent and important family of Moonshade, the Amarthan family. A nice little house on the outskirts of the city, a large cottage of cobblestone with carefully grown ivy and flowers. Light birch wood and slight pink-tinted cherry wood give their home a sleek but cute and welcoming appearance, only helped by the magically lit fairy lights. The mother of this household, a moon elf with a knack for magic, was granted a position on the Grand Council of the whole kingdom. Her stark white hair like silk was always seen flowing nearly to the ground, acting as a veil of mystery and grace. Everyone was surprised to hear who she had fallen in love with, a sun elf cleric with wild sunlit hair and a personality to match. While people were surprised by their marriage, they quickly saw how they evened each other out, and their status and capabilities with magic gave them something in common. This brings us to the true start of this story: their son, who is as peculiar as their unpredictable relationship. An elf embodying the rare eclipse. His hair as wild as his father's and as stunning in color as his mother's. His skin shared its darkness with his mom, but the sunny golden freckles on his cheeks and shoulders couldn't help but shine through the boldness of his father. Yes, Vervain embodied the union of dark and light, shining like silver and gold equally. However, there was one trait he surprisingly didn't get from either of them. Their inherent talent for magic didn't seem to carry over whatsoever with Vervain. When he was little, he was always found pulling apart, tinkering with, and putting together any type of machinery around the house he could find, however rare that was. And sometimes being told off for getting a bit too close to the magic crystals his father kept for his work. Shiny and alluring to any want-to-be inventor, but also incredibly powerful and dangerous things. As I said, they were different, but they had that commonality of magic, and so they both tried and tried to get him interested in magic. Maybe he could be a cleric like his father and help people all across the world, or a druid and become a force of nature himself, or maybe even a paladin. He could be the bravest knight the world had ever seen, but their efforts were in vain. He always went back to his dreams of being a genius inventor, revolutionize and cover the world in gold and silver. As previously mentioned, with his father being a cleric, a notoriously skilled one at that, he had renovated a part of their home to be a clinic people could visit for their ailments or injuries. Vervain was always shy, but when he was about 12, his father would make him work alongside him to try and get him to learn the ways of being a cleric. He hated nearly every second of it. Not only did he have to somewhat interact with patients, but he saw it as a waste of time, taking him away from learning what he actually wanted to, even if he knew his father meant well. But one day, Vervain would sit in on a session that would change his life forever. It was a surprise visit from an autumn elf who looked like he had certainly seen better days. His hair was pointed up in nearly every direction, with the ends singed and black. Burns ran up his arms, and his hefty work gloves and apron had holes burned into them. Vervain's father was obviously interested to hear the story of whatever had caused this, and when they heard it, Vervain's disinterest and apathy disappeared in an instant, because the man who had introduced himself as Sorel Serranier said he got these injuries in an explosion. A new invention he was working on malfunctioned, and nearly blew him out of his workshop. Before Sorel could even properly finish his story, to his amusement, Vervain practically shoved every single makeshift invention he had into his arms and introduced himself as an inventor as well, verbally bombarding him with, "I want to learn how to be an inventor. One day I'm going to revolutionize the world. Where did you learn?" And any and all questions under the sun. Sorel heard Vervain's passions and knew who his parents were. In that moment, he saw the bright light of creativity he felt when he was younger. He knew it would be a damn shame if this kind of talent and passion was wasted in a cleric's home. So there and then, Sorel offered to take Vervain on as an apprentice. And in that moment, looking at Sorel, a great opportunity, and down at their son's excitement, Vervain's father and mother accepted that their son wouldn't walk in their shoes. So at least they could give him an opportunity to walk in his own. So, thus began Vervain's new life of working under Sorel's expertise. Sorel lived in the bustling and bright city center of Moonshade with his daughter Penny, a shy but very sweet girl, and Vervain lived on the outskirts, so he'd spend a week in the Serenier home with Sorel and then go back to his parents. Though very quickly the time spent at Sorel's home increased as time went on. While he loved his parents and loved visiting them, the intoxication of learning and connecting intellectually with Sorel kept him excitedly working in the home's basement workshop, a sanctuary of tools, metals, and machinery for people like Vervain and Sorel. The wood from the walls and workbench, warm candlelight, and subtle sweet smell of iron became Vervain's home away from home, working all throughout the day and sometimes the night, but fairly quickly he was spending months at a time at Sorel's, his thirst for knowledge finally quenched after all those years spent in a life not meant for him to live. Vervain and Sorel very much got along. They were both very happy to have someone like them. Sorel was happy he could share his knowledge with the next generation, and Vervain finally had an outlook for all the ideas bouncing around in his head. Penny was still shy as ever, as most little kids are around a new person, and Vervain was quite shy himself, but they got along as well as they could when Penny was still the age she just wanted to play pretend, and Vervain was old enough to be dreaming about his future. Namely, two inventions he had been dreaming of but hadn't executed. One, a bit more indulgent, was a mechanical cat. His parents wouldn't let him get a pet back home, so he thought he could invent one that caused less of a mess. And the second, a weapon, like the world had never seen. He hadn't fully named it or fully conceptualized it, but he knew if he finished it, it could truly be the thing to revolutionize the world. The thing to change his life. Along the way, through long nights spent supervised by Sorel, through long talks of what Sorel's life was like before Vervain knew him, and Sorel, in turn, asking about Vervain's dreams of his future, and wanting to know how Vervain wants to spend the time of youth he no longer has. Finally, one invention with the help of Sorel was made, springing to life with a click and a meow. Cypress, the world's first mechanical cat, was made. Not only a companion, but a crowning achievement laid in runes, claws, and gold for Vervain's potential. Nevertheless, the next few years went by until Vervain was around 16, bouncing between homes less frequently, but his parents eventually came around to his passion fully when they saw how great he was doing. But soon Vervain would wish he had spent more time with them. As one night, when Vervain was in his workshop, deafening bells and yelling interrupted his and Sorel's workshop time. A bit annoyed but curious, they both left to see what news was worthy of the town crier to interrupt everyone's evenings. And when they heard, Vervain felt that first instance of chills. His head clear yet racing at the same time, taking steps backwards but not feeling any weight beneath his feet. Meanwhile, Sorel's full attention was now on Vervain, as the cries through the street shouted out the strange mass disappearance of mages and magic users all throughout Moonshade mere hours ago. As soon as he asked, Sorel found a willing driver for the evening and a horse and carriage, and Vervain and Sorel were on their way to see if Vervain's parents were involved in this magical disappearance, whatever it was. And when they arrived at his home, it was all too obvious. The moonlight casting a cold glow over the home. No lights on, no sign of movement through the windows. Vervain burst through the door, and sure enough, there was no sign of his parents anywhere, except for food laid out on the table, but not yet eaten. It was outside on the doorstep of his childhood home that the young boy broke down in Sorel's arms. Time slipped away in that moment. The only things that felt real were the tears pouring from his face where grief, anger, shock, all couldn't be kept inside. The carriage home was silent. Sorel only offering the comfort of silence while Vervain's head just couldn't comprehend this being real. How did this happen? How could this happen? Was it even real? Where were his parents? Why couldn't he have just a few more moments with them? Why can't he see them again? Was he ever going to? Things shifted, as they obviously would after someone's parents go missing abruptly. Once, where Vervain would go to express his creativity, now Vervain was spending any waking moment in his workshop, throwing himself into his work and studies in order to stave off any thoughts pertaining to the explosion of emotions he was feeling. This time, he was focusing on his great invention, the weapon mentioned earlier. Some way to feel any type of accomplishment moving forward, or to just lose himself in his work and stop thinking about them. He was getting closer to reaching the finality of this invention, but he just couldn't grasp that his emotional state was getting in the way of his work. He was too blind to see it. Weeks and then months went by of Sorel at first leaving him alone to give him time and space, then eventually trying to reach out, leaving food for him in the workshop and collecting it when it got cold, trying to talk to him but to no avail. After about 3 months of trying to give his apprentice and now adopted son some space and hoping he'd come around, Sorel finally accepted he might need a little nudging and comfort to help him get through the next stages of grief, and also genuinely hated seeing him this way. So, Sorel and Vervain get to talking, and while Vervain is sad about his parents being gone, Vervain mostly talks about how he himself wasn't smart enough to see it coming, how he feels like he needs to be smarter to figure out what happened. Maybe he could bring them back. He was more focused on trying to fix it than grieve. Sorel sees this as very unhealthy and tries to guide him through on how to really feel his emotions, and abridged better than I could say here, tells him that this wasn't his fault, he can't be a control freak about this, and that he can't try to figure out how to reverse death because it's inevitable. And at that line, you probably remember that this is a character based on Frankenstein. In years, Vervain had settled quite nicely into this new life. No longer an apprentice, and now fully adopted son. Sorel was already a father, so that helped him connect with Vervain on that level a lot easier than if he wasn't. As well, any time he and Penny spent together became cherished. While Penny was still rather shy at first, she still liked having someone else in the house paying attention to her. Sometimes Vervain would let Penny paint his nails or braid his hair a few times. I imagine Sorel and Vervain were invited to many make-pretend tea parties. And even better, Sorel cleared out an old storage space in the basement and built Vervain his own little workshop. When they wanted to work together, they'd work in Sorel's part of the shop as usual, but this wasn't just Sorel giving him a new space to work. This was giving Vervain a place in this house that was truly his. Space and privacy. And this is where finally, as healed from what happened as he could be, Vervain managed to finish his grand invention. The invention to revolutionize the world. In universe, because it's the first of its kind, it doesn't have a name, but you, dear listener, would recognize this as a gun. Though all was well and good, we know that it's one of my stories, so the good times certainly can't last forever. And one day, one of Sorel's neighbors told Sorel that he should check up on Vervain. Sorel is obviously confused about what and why, because he seems like he's doing better, and the neighbor explains that he and a few others have spotted Vervain sneaking around at night, acting a bit sketchy, always leaving with nothing, but coming back with something. So that night, Sorel goes down into their basement. Penny sleeping after a large family meal, all the neighbors asleep, with only one noise coming from Vervain's workshop. That familiar clang, clang, clanging of metal. He opened the door and immediately saw that Vervain hadn't been moving on. He'd been moving forward. The walls, benches, and floor were covered in blueprints and pages of forbidden magic, necromancy, different realities, how to bring the dead back to life, and a glow of purple and blue emanated from large magic crystal. But by far the most concerning, frightening, and dreadful thing laid around the shelves and tables were the jars, bloated in liquid, fingers, legs, eyeballs, veins, covered in drawing studies about how to put them all together, surrounded by drawings, covered in drawing studies of how to put them all together. This cacophony of the unnatural swirled around the only part of the workshop that wasn't covered in this. Material was the center, Vervain, spotlighted by everything around him, working over what looked like a body made of gold covered in runes. The world's first mechanical person. The door opening made Vervain's head whip around. It's a certain feeling when a parent is mad at you. Disappointment is another. But when Vervain saw the look of disgust melted in with fear on Sorel's face, that made his heart sink. Sorel had always looked so proud of Vervain, but this twist of his genius, this was too much, this was too far. Sorel yelled at Vervain from across the room. What did he think he was doing? Why couldn't he accept that the past was the past? Why did he have to do this? Gesturing wildly at Vervain, he looked around the workshop and picked up one of the crystals nearby, pointing it at him. How could he do this? Vervain couldn't let Sorel stop him. Sorel took a step back. Vervain was so close, he could do this. He couldn't let anything stop him now. Sorel was nearly out the door, and Vervain grabbed his gun. Sorel turned around, hearing a click coming from behind him, and in one instant, with one pull of the trigger, the workshop lit up in purple fire from the crystal in Sorel's hand exploding. After the fire and smoke cleared, the scene was set. Sorel scattered in pieces along the floor, Vervain fading in and out of consciousness, and both of their blood soaking the floor. His vision faded. His mind, still active, saw Penny at the door screaming. He hoped she didn't see too much. He saw Sorel's body littered around the workshop. He looked at the pieces. God, he just wanted to stop him. Sorel shouldn't look like this. All of his work was destroyed and reduced to ash. Why were there 3 arms on the floor? Next, he woke up in a cleric's shop, bandaged with his whole body hurting. Someone rushed to his side when he woke up. He explained that he and Sorel were working on something new when the explosion accidentally went off. He hoped they couldn't tell he was lying, considering for the next few months everyone had comforted him. They knew Sorel was such a great man. They were so sorry for his loss. They hoped Vervain wasn't blaming himself. They didn't know what their words were doing. The guilt only grew stronger with each sympathetic look or word. The worst of it was Penny. She was fully relying on him now. He was taking care of her, and the worst part, he was great at it. She thought of him as her darling older brother who could do no wrong, but he knew what he really was. Now for the conclusion. He was in too deep. He couldn't let Sorel and his father and mother die in vain, and now he had to complete his latest invention. Wasn't that so much fun? I hope you enjoyed this story, and if you made it this far into the video, please don't forget to like and follow. You can support me with just 2 clicks, and now we can get into dissecting the story. First, I'd like to start with the writing itself, with the foreshadowing and blah blah blah. After that, we can get into the characters. My favorite part. The first piece of foreshadowing starts at the very beginning with Sorel's introduction. When he's introduced, he comes to Vervain's family's cleric clinic after having an accidental explosion in his workshop, and that causes him to meet Vervain. This, right at the very beginning, links Vervain, Sorel, and a workshop through an explosion. Obviously, I hope you remember how Sorel exited the story. The second is the gun, and this is a very, very basic writing thing called Chekhov's gun. That states if there is a gun in the story, it must go off. This is meant to explain that if you introduce something in your story, it must be used or utilized within the story, otherwise you should cut it out. And that's a very useful writing tip that I think anyone should take on board. It helps you cut out a lot of unuseful information, and it helps keep your story cleaner. I took this piece of writing advice a little more literally in this story. It's also important to go into what the workshop itself represents, which is to say Vervain's mental state. In the beginning, when all was happy, sunshine, and rainbows, he and Sorel were working together to create something harmless and happy together. Cypress. Then, when his parents died and kicked the bucket, he threw himself into his work. He isolated himself and began to make something that could only ever be harmful, even if he thought it would be good or beneficial. Then, when Sorel tries to comfort Vervain but accidentally pushes him away, this is represented by Sorel building him his own space in the workshop, something that on the surface was supposed to help him but only further isolated him. This represents him fully pulling away into his ideals of the past, what could have been, and trying to fix something that couldn't be and only hurt his present. Now we can get to the characters and what they represent, but first I need to explain what this story is about totally. Vervain's theme is partially grief, but specifically is about being unable to move on from the past and how it can affect the present. Sorel is supposed to fully encapsulate how when you're stuck in the past, you can lose or directly push away people or things in the present. The only reason Sorel died is because of Vervain's obsession, his grief, and inability to accept the past. And with that, I do want to say his murder in the story obviously happened as a murder, but story-wise, I wanted to use it as an allegory or representation. I just don't want to seem like I'm trying to portray mentally ill or grieving people as dangerous. People with mental illness are actually far more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators of it, because I don't know why I'm saying they, I should be saying we, because we have a more vulnerable state of mind. I just wanted to say that because I don't ever want my art to convey a harmful message or a stereotype. I'm doing this and posting videos because I want to share real feelings and hopefully let people know their more real and unflattering emotions aren't alone in feeling them. So, simply put, murder equals pushing people away and losing them. It isn't supposed to be as literal as just murder. And with that, now we can get into what Penny represents. God, poor Penny. She represents that feeling when not even necessarily grief, just when any negative emotion affects you so deeply you know it's changed you, and how you know you're acting different around people you love, and feeling bad you aren't the same person you used to be for them. When something terrible happens and you try to be around people who are still the same, it almost feels like you're lying about who you are, or feel guilty for not being the old you. That's why I made sure Penny didn't know what Vervain did to her father, to make her view Vervain the same way. But Vervain knew what he was, to have him feel that guilt for something that represents a real-world tragedy. I don't know if you noticed, but they're all named after flowers, and all flowers have meanings. I use the Victorian meaning of flowers, or their meanings according to thegardeningchannel.com. Sorel as the flower means affection, obviously, because he's a great dad, or was a great dad. But Sorel Wood means wit ill-timed, smarts not used correctly. So I used this to foreshadow that he's smart, but not smart enough to realize the danger he was in because of his affection, the two meanings of his name combined. Penny is short for pennyroyal, a flower that means flee or get away, because as well, she doesn't know the danger she's in. Lastly, we have Vervain himself. Vervain is a very pretty flower, but it's very poisonous, showing that his appearance of the great older brother, genius inventor, and golden child is deceiving. For his design, I made him the embodiment of the eclipse. Two sides, one light and one dark, with one inevitably consuming the other. But I never specified whether it was a lunar or solar eclipse, so it's a mystery which side will win in the end. As well, his prosthetics are supposed to make him look more like an eclipse because his skin is dark, but his prosthetics are gold, which makes them shine like the sun, his natural skin or natural nature. And he only got these prosthetics because of something cold and unnatural that he did. So how many of these little details did you catch in the original story? I'd love to know what you think, or any suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the comments. I really hope you enjoyed the video. I hope to see you again in the next video, and bye-bye!